There are many beautiful births in this world. The birth of a tree. The birth of a lion. The birth of a child that would one day become Mrs. Davis. And yet, every birth is met with chaos. Destruction. And death.
The ocean. 141,600 million square miles of blue oasis. A source of life for millions of species, both large and small. 70% of oxygen, one of the basic necessities for life, is generated here by billions upon billions of phytoplankton and millions of plants. The ocean absorbs much of the harmful carbon dioxide in the atmosphere through gas exchange. With the power of the winds at its beck and call, the ocean regulates much of the Earth's temperature and weather patterns. The ocean is full of life from dolphins and clownfish to sea snakes and sharks. With many dangerous species in the ocean, many people will avoid it at all costs. But the truth is, we can harm the ocean more than it can harm us.
In the world, runoff and agricultural pollution are some of the leading sources of oceanic pollution. Never before in human history have we polluted the ocean as much as we are today. What is runoff? I'm glad you asked. Runoff is quantity of water discharged in surface streams. Runoff includes not only the waters that travel over the land surface and through channels to reach a stream, but also interflow, the water that infiltrates the soil surface and travels by means of gravity towards a stream channel, always above the main groundwater level, and eventually empties into the channel. Runoff also includes groundwater that is discharged into the ocean. Due to runoff, 30% of the ocean is now unsafe for fishing and swimming. Agricultural pollution is when fertilizers and/or waste from farms finds its way into streams and eventually into the ocean. This pollution is the largest cause for oceanic dead zones.
In 2008, the United States National Research Council started looking into the problem of urban runoff. Urban runoff can be caused by floods, leaking pollutants, and household waste. Gasoline and motor oil from automobiles, as well as pesticides and insecticides from lawns, are some of the most common aspects of runoff. Short-term effects can include shock and destruction of local habitats, and the long-term effects include raised temperature, silt contamination, the release of many toxins used in urban development, and of course, dead zones. Ocean pollution has ramped up severely over the last few centuries due to industrial booms and a lack of recognition to what we are doing to the ocean. 80% of pollution into the marine environment comes from the land. One of the biggest sources is called non-point source pollution, which occurs as a result of runoff. Non-point source pollution includes many small sources like septic tanks, cars, trucks and boats, plus larger sources such as farms, ranches and forest areas. Much of this makes its way to the sea.
Agriculture has been part of human life for over 10,000 years. The use of cultivation rather than hunting and gathering has increased human population from small to monumental numbers. And as the human population has increased, so has agriculture. Agricultural land being used before the Industrial Revolution was estimated to be around 265 million hectares. Afterwards, in 1980, we had around 1.5 billion hectares of agricultural land. As land became less easy to come by and the soil started to wear out, extreme fertilizers came into existence around 1840. Pesticides also made their debuts in the early 20th century and have taken off sharply since 1960. Both of these adversely affect water quality, and leakages into water supplies and streams are happening more than ever before.
Now, runoff has been happening for centuries. Every time there has been a natural disaster, like a flood, Hundreds of pounds of chemicals, metals and plastics have surged into aquatic ecosystems. The increase in toxic chemicals and cheap non-biodegradable plastics has worsened the situation. Litter gets washed straight through the storm drains into river ecosystems and eventually into the ocean. Dumping is also a very large problem that could be fixed. All the pollution from agricultural waste puts tons of toxins and nutrients into the water column, which can promote massive algal blooms in lakes and rivers. The biggest damage of these blooms happens around every spring in the Gulf of Mexico.
Springtime, when the flowers bloom and life begins again after a cold winter slumber. Beauty and life are noticeable all around. Farmers are beginning to plant again, but where there is planting, there are fertilizers. Because of the huge boom in fertilizers in springtime, there is a monumental uptick in the fertilizers that enter the water supply. These make their way through the rivers as usual and end up in the Gulf of Mexico.
Professor Julius Caesar Hawkins at the Diablo Vista College has a PhD in theoretical pollutionary physics and is one of the world-renowned leaders in dead zone research.
My expertise involves dead zones. A dead zone is an aquatic and marine zone that are caused by an increase in chemical nutrients in the water, particularly nitrogen and phosphorus. These chemical and fundamental building blocks of single-celled plant-like organisms that live in the water and whose growth is limited by these materials. This can lead to rapid increase in certain types of phytoplankton, known as an algal bloom. The major groups of algae are green algae, dioflagellates, and diatom algae. Increase and input of nitrogen and phosphorus generally cause cyanobacteria to bloom, and this causes dead zones. Eventually, after all the algae ends up dying, the bacteria decomposes the algae. The bacteria ends up using all the oxygen in the water because it's decomposing the algae. Once there's no more oxygen left in the water, the fish end up suffocating because there's no oxygen for them to put through their gills. Eventually, everything in that area ends up dying, and that's why it's called a dead zone, because there's a lack of life there, and everything there is dead.
Consequences such as silt contamination and excessive sedimentation from pollution can have detrimental effects on the kelp forests on our California coast. The sedimentation can bury new plant growth from ever reaching its potential. The excessive fertilizers and silt contamination can also cause algal blooms, which hurt new growth even more by blocking sunlight. Couple this with the increasing sea urchin population, and you have a lot of the once resilient kelp forests being destroyed. And the predators who are supposed to be keeping the sea urchin population in check, sea otters, are suffering from the effects of fish loss and oil spills caused by pollution. It really is a positive feedback loop. As habitat destruction runs rampant, we lose species after species until our ocean becomes an expansive, lifeless desert.
Mass habitat and species loss not big enough for you? Let's get personal. Pollution not only affects the ocean and its inhabitants, it affects us too. With the ocean controlling the planet's temperature, winds, weather patterns, and climate, as well as feeding around 1/7 of the world's population consistently, and providing economic stability to many places in the world, it is clear that humankind needs the ocean. However, runoff, along with its effects, are preventing the ocean from doing its job. This source of life is dying, and we are speeding up the process. The destruction of the ocean is destroying our way of life. There are now an estimated 405 dead zones in the ocean, a number that has increased tenfold since it was first measured in the 1960s. In 2008, the Gulf of Mexico dead zone was estimated to be 7,988 square miles, roughly the size of New Jersey. In many urban areas, 55% of all rainwater becomes runoff, leading straight to natural waterways and eventually the ocean. Chemicals and life forms in urban runoff can create many diseases. These waters can contain high amounts of nitrate, leading to shortness of breath and blue oxygen-starved skin. Copper, zinc, and lead occur almost everywhere in urban areas, and runoff can easily be transported back to us. Insecticides create many poisoning scenarios. All of these metals and other chemicals and life forms can kill fish and decimate local and seasonal populations, creating fishing problems for humans and a large wound on the economy.
Many environmental groups are studying runoff and how it affects us. The most prevalent one is the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, or the NOAA. They study a wide range of topics including ocean life, pollution, runoff, and thousands of other ocean, land and air-based topics. Their research connects to many other online articles on ocean preservation, such as the Monterey Bay National Marine Sanctuary. The MBNMS focuses on Monterey Bay area and types of pollution that affect it. The NOAA's National Weather Service is a separate branch that focuses on the weather, mainly the effect of pollution and runoff on the ocean and the weather or climate. The United States National Research Council is also involved in finding information and possible solutions. With the large amount of research being done on this problem, more and more people are getting involved in finding solutions.
The future for this issue is uncertain at best. With so many economic, environmental, and political aspects surrounding the issues of agricultural pollution and urban runoff, researchers are still unsure over our future. The use of fertilizers, especially nitrogen-based ones, are projected to grow more slowly due to increasing innovation and efficient uses of the fertilizer. However, many developing countries that need to feed large populations still lack efficiency. For example, in China, the world's largest nitrogen fertilizer consumer, up to 60% of the nitrogen is wasted due to leaching, runoff, and volatilization. Pesticide use has had massive gains over the last 4 decades. This is projected to only decrease slightly in most countries, but due to movements in Europe and especially the UK against GMOs and pesticides, the growth rate around the EU is projected to grow slowly. Unfortunately, due to booming populations all around the world, agriculture will become all the more popular as a way to feed the billions of inhabitants in each country. Without future innovations, the future looks increasingly bleak.
Thankfully, people are trying to actively solve the problem. Cleopatra Egyptson has a PhD in transformative pollutionography from Arizona State University and is a professor at Chico State.
Solutions to solve the problem of runoff, but really everything starts with us. The easiest thing to do is educate people about the problem everywhere in the world, especially the farming communities, about the true dangers of pollution. This will help people get involved and take advantage of their collective voting powers to find leaders who actually care about the environment and the future of the world. Increased technical training for cities, counties, and planning staff could then start putting a stop to the runoff. Creating better sewage systems, treatment plants would at least help fight the issues before we finally develop a way to use less fertilizers and pesticides for crop growth. Then these cities and counties should also adopt the California Environmental Quality Act guidelines as soon as possible. With this, there would be an increase of support and collaboration with regional monitoring programs. These programs would then put in more severe guidelines, but this would be very tough to do because of the large pull on the agricultural industries have on public officials. Citizens can also continue to stay active by joining programs such as Urban Watch and actively supporting bills such as the Clean Water Bill for Chesapeake.
This issue will continue to affect our world. But thanks to researchers like Cleopatra and Julius, there seems to be a light at the end of the tunnel. Hopefully you will join us on our worldwide mission to stop pollution.
With the steady death and destruction of our blue planet, all seems hopeless. Yet with every instance of decay, life blooms anew in waves upon waves of infinite glory.